The parking lot behind the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis was dark except for a single streetlight that barely worked, flickering like it couldn't decide whether to give up completely. Summer heat still hung in the air, even though it was past midnight. A man in black leaned against a rusted Chevrolet, smoking a cigarette, watching the stage door like he was waiting for something he knew wouldn't come. Inside, screams echoed through the concrete walls. Not screams of fear, screams of teenage girls losing their minds over a boy with slicked-back hair and dangerous hips. The man in black took another drag and didn't move. He'd heard those screams before, just never for him. But what happened in the next 10 minutes would define the invisible war between two legends that most people never knew existed. Memphis, Tennessee. Summer of 1955. Sun Records had just released two songs that were climbing the charts in the South. Blue Suede Shoes by a wild piano player named Carl Perkins, and a song called I Walk the Line by a tall, quiet man from Arkansas named Johnny Cash. But the real phenomenon, the one that made girls faint and parents worry, was Elvis Presley. Same label, same studio, same dream, completely different orbit. Johnny Cash understood something early that most people took years to figure out. There were two kinds of stars in this world. Stars that burned bright and pulled everything toward them, and stars that existed in the cold, dark corners where light didn't reach. Elvis was the sun. Johnny was learning to live in the shadow. They'd met at Sun Studio months earlier. Sam Phillips, the producer who discovered both of them, had introduced them like a proud father showing off his sons. The studio had been cramped, hot, smelling of cigarettes and old wood. Elvis had shaken Johnny's hand with that famous grin, the one that made camera flashes pop and girls hold their breath. His grip was warm, confident, like someone who'd never doubted he belonged somewhere. Johnny had shaken back with a grip that was firm but quiet, the kind of handshake that didn't ask for attention. "You're real good, man," Elvis had said, genuine warmth in his voice. "That song, Cry, 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 that's something special." "Thanks," Johnny had replied, his voice low and gravelly even then. "You're doing pretty well yourself." Pretty well was an understatement. Elvis wasn't just doing well. Elvis was exploding. Every show sold out in minutes. Every radio station fought to play his records first. Every newspaper wanted his photograph. Meanwhile, Johnny Cash was playing county fairs and honky-tonks to crowds that clapped politely and went home. He'd stand on stages made of plywood, singing to farmers and their families who appreciated the music but didn't lose their minds over it. No screaming, no fainting, just respectful applause and requests for one more song before closing time. Have you ever worked just as hard as someone else but watched them get everything you wanted? Johnny never said it out loud, but the people who knew him saw it in his eyes. The way he'd watch Elvis perform, and his jaw would tighten just slightly. The way he'd turn down interviews because he knew the reporters really wanted to ask about Elvis anyway. The way he'd leave parties early when someone started talking about that Presley kid. But here's what made Johnny Cash different from every other musician who envied Elvis. Johnny didn't want to be Elvis. He just wanted to matter the way Elvis mattered. And somewhere deep in his chest, in that hollow place where the pills would eventually go, Johnny was starting to believe that maybe he never would. The night at Ellis Auditorium, Johnny wasn't even performing. He'd driven 2 hours from his small apartment just to see what it looked like when someone became a legend in real time. He'd bought a ticket, sat in the back row, watched Elvis command that stage like he was born on it. Watched the way every movement, every breath, every slight smile made the crowd react like they were all connected to the same electrical current. And when the show ended and the crowd flooded the exits, still buzzing with energy, Johnny had walked out the back way, through the alley, to the parking lot, because facing that crowd felt like admitting defeat. He was halfway through his second cigarette when the stage door opened. Elvis Presley stepped out, surrounded by three men in suits, managers or handlers, or whatever they called the people who protected stars from the world. Elvis was still in his performance clothes, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his hair slightly messed up in a way that probably made him even more attractive. He was laughing at something one of the suits had said. Then he saw Johnny. "Cash," Elvis called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "That you, man?" Johnny straightened up from the car but didn't move toward them. "Yeah, it's me." Elvis said something to the suits and walked over. Just him. No entourage, no protection. He crossed that parking lot like it was the most natural thing in the world to leave your handlers and talk to the guy leaning against a beat-up Chevrolet. "What are you doing out here?" Elvis asked, pulling out his own pack of cigarettes. "You perform tonight?" "Nope," Johnny said. "Just watching." Elvis lit his cigarette, and for a moment they both stood there, two men in their early 20s, smoking under a broken streetlight in Memphis. One of them had just made 2,000 people scream. The other had driven 2 hours to watch it happen. "You're real quiet, you know that?" Elvis said, but not like it was a criticism, more like an observation, like he'd been watching Johnny from a distance and finally found the words for what he'd noticed. "I know. Sam says you're gonna be big, says you got something different, something that doesn't fade when the spotlight turns off." Johnny looked at Elvis then, really looked at him, and what he saw wasn't what he expected. Elvis Presley, the man who made girls cry just by smiling, looked tired. Not physically tired. Something deeper. Something in his eyes that the stage lights and camera flashes couldn't hide. Like carrying a spotlight everywhere you go eventually burns you from the inside out. "You believe him?" Johnny asked. "Sam? Sam's never wrong about talent." Elvis took a drag. "But there's different kinds of big, you know?" "What do you mean?" This was the moment. The conversation that nobody else heard. The thing that would later make Johnny Cash understand that envy is a poison you drink yourself. Elvis looked back at the stage door where his handlers were waiting, then at Johnny. "You know what they want from me? They want me to move my hips and sing pretty and make them feel something they can't feel in their regular lives. That's it. They don't actually care about me. They care about what I make them feel. Tomorrow, if I stopped making them feel that way, they'd move on to the next guy who could." He paused, took another drag of his cigarette. "But you," Elvis continued, pointing his cigarette at Johnny's chest. "When I heard I walked the line on the radio, you know what I thought? I thought, that's a man who means every word he's singing. That's not a performance. That's a confession." "It was," Johnny said quietly. "See, that's the difference. People scream for me because I make them forget their problems. But people are going to listen to you because you remind them they're not alone in their problems. That's harder to do. That's scarier. But it lasts longer. Have you ever had someone you envied tell you they envied you back?" Johnny felt something shift in his chest. Not relief exactly. More like recognition. "You really believe that?" Johnny asked. "I know it," Elvis said. "You're going to outlast all of us, Cash, because you're not selling them a dream. You're selling them the truth, and the truth doesn't go out of style." One of the suits called out from the stage door. "Elvis, we gotta go. Girls found the back exit." Sure enough, distant screaming was getting closer. Elvis smiled that famous smile, but when he looked at Johnny, it faded into something more real. "You keep doing what you're doing," Elvis said. "Don't try to be me. Don't try to be anybody. The world's already got an Elvis. It needs a Johnny Cash." He stubbed out his cigarette and started walking back to the stage door. Then he stopped and turned around. "And Cash, next time you come to one of my shows, come say hi before you hide in the parking lot." Then he was gone. disappeared into the building with his handlers just as a wave of teenage girls came screaming around the corner. Johnny watched them run past, chasing the sun, while he stayed in the shadows. Their footsteps echoed on the pavement, then faded into the Memphis night. But for the first time since he'd signed with Sun Records, Johnny Cash didn't feel invisible. He felt like exactly what he was supposed to be, not less than Elvis, just different. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next 18 months proved Elvis right in ways Johnny wouldn't understand until years later. Elvis went to Hollywood, to national television, to a level of fame that seemed almost inhuman. Johnny Cash went to prisons, to small towns, to the people who didn't scream but listened with their whole bodies. Elvis became the king. Johnny became the ghost that haunted American loneliness. They'd see each other occasionally, backstage at award shows, brief moments at the Grand Ole Opry, and every time there was that understanding, that silent acknowledgement that they were both carrying something heavy, just in different ways. Once, in 1963, they passed each other in a hallway at a Nashville recording studio. Elvis nodded, Johnny nodded back. No words needed. Just two men who'd stood in that Memphis parking lot and told each other the truth. In 1968, when Johnny Cash was asked in an interview about Elvis Presley, the interviewer expected the usual platitudes about talent and success. Instead, Johnny said something most people didn't understand. Elvis is the light. I'm what happens when the light goes out. We're both needed. The interviewer laughed, thinking it was modesty. But Johnny wasn't being modest. He was being honest. Because that night in the parking lot behind Ellis Auditorium, Elvis Presley had given Johnny Cash something more valuable than fame. He'd given him permission to be exactly who he was. Years later, when Elvis died in 1977, Johnny Cash didn't cry in public, didn't give interviews about their friendship or share memories for the cameras. He went home, sat in his dark living room, and played I Walk the Line on his guitar. Just once. Quietly. The same song Elvis had heard on the radio 22 years earlier. Like a prayer for a man who'd understood him before he understood himself. Maybe that's the real story. Not that Johnny Cash envied Elvis Presley, but that two men found each other in a parking lot in Memphis and realized the same light that reveals one person creates the shadow where another person stands. And both are necessary. Both are real. Both matter. The world needs its kings who shine so bright they change everything just by existing. But it also needs its ghosts who walk through the darkness and make people feel less alone in it. The world remembers Elvis as the king who changed everything. The world remembers Johnny Cash as the man in black who made loneliness sound like coming home. But in that parking lot in 1955, they were just two kids from the South, smoking cigarettes under a broken streetlight, trying to figure out what it meant to matter. And maybe, just maybe, they both did.